Yes, they're over there on that chair.
All right, all set from there? All right, I'll call the Halifax Board of Selectmen meeting of Tuesday, November 2nd to order. It's a 5:30 meeting. First up, the meeting is being taped by Area 58 and being simulcast out through Zoom. First up, we have the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? The only thing I'm going to need is a recess at the end of the meeting to go grab the executive session meeting notes out of the truck.
We're not doing the last two appointments, correct?
The FOB system, I guess Caesar said that there's no necessity for
Right.
doing that. And then for the water department, Steve Hayward had said that he wanted to postpone. He's going to meet with the water department later this month and at some point ask for a meeting, but it's another meeting.
That would be the only two edits, Gordon.
Okay. With those edits, is it moved?
Move this in.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We've got regular selectmen meeting minutes of August 10th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
So,
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
aye.
All right. October 27th, 2021.
Move it.
Is there a second? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay. Ashley?
All right. I'm gonna do all of them except for 36, okay? Oh, no,
Okay.
except for 36 and 37, then we'll go back.
Okay.
I move to affirm approval of the following warrants and commitments. Withholding warrant number 35 for $150,705.62. Vendor warrant number 38 for $504,268.06. Withholding warrant number 39 for $169,043.33. Ambulance commitment from 10/4 to 10/10 for $97,947.50. Ambulance commitment from 10/11 to 10/17/21 for $63,709.06. And then another ambulance commitment from 10/18 to 10/24/21 for $30,983.17.
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay.
I move to affirm approval of the following warrants and commitments. Vendor warrant number 36, except for number 880.
You can just do the whole thing and I'll
You're
abstain.
gonna abstain from the whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Vendor warrant number 36 for $278,981.20. And payroll warrant number 37 for $505,424.13.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
I move to affirm payment of the following selectmen bills. Halifax Postmaster for $248.80. National Grid for Town Hall electricity for $703.93. Harry B. Harding and Son for $108.30. William August Esquire for $240. Michael C. Gilman for $1,155. WB Mason for $65.15. And Turkey Swamp Farm reimbursement of overpayment on earth removal for $882.80.
So second.
Second those.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay. Pass unanimous.
I move to approve the following warrant and commitment. Vendor warrant number 40 for $69,154.29. And the mobile home park fee number 11 for $5,160.
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, unanimous.
Oh, no, so those ones you gotta approve, those ones are inside the red folder.
Okay. So these are different than what these ones are?
Yeah, those ones we already signed.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So I move to affirm payments of these following selectmen bills. KP Law for $1,686.20. Michael C. Gilman for $2,959. Relax for LexisNexis for $74.26. WB Mason for $40.47. And O'Reilly's for $39.40.
Second.
What was the, what?
KP.
KP.
Good. I'll let you call it though.
Alright. So, all those in favor, aye.
I'm gonna recuse.
Those are. Alright, I think that's all I got.
Okay. On to Charlie and the discussions.
So Green Earth Cannabis had asked that the board postpone any action concerning the host community agreement. The reason is that the formal outreach form was back in April. Under the state regulations from the Cannabis Control Commission, the outreach form has to occur within 6 months of submission to the state of their application. Since 6 months has passed since that time, and the form that we held, not necessarily ours, but through the Board of Selectmen's office, was done earlier this month, and we also are now already in November. The 6-month time period has passed. They'd like to make sure they don't have any legal problems with the Cannabis Control Commission, and therefore I think their plan probably would be to hold another formal community outreach forum at a future time, meet all the requirements of that, eventually come back to the board, ask for a decision one way or the other, and then move from there. But they ask that the board not take any action for or against the HCA tonight.
I'll make a motion to end this. We don't take any action at all with cannabis, Green Earth Cannabis this evening.
No, actually, I need to recuse myself because you guys talked to.
Is there a second?
So we're saying we're taking no action, correct?
Right, you're
Yeah.
passing, or you're not denying it, you're not approving it.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And eventually they'll get back to us and
Yeah.
figure out the form and everything like that. Where's that? So a couple weeks ago, I submitted my resignation effective Saturday, November 20th to the town clerk and to the board. We'd be working during the next few weeks clearing out and organizing the office so that whoever's coming in has less burdensome walk-in than they would after 26 years. I know later on in the agenda we'll be talking about doing transition succession. Cemetery deeds, there are 3 to sign. Let's see here. What I got. 1, 2, 3. There's that. There's no approval. The board hasn't voted on cemetery deeds. It's just on the agenda. So make sure we get it done. August bill from KP Law. The bill had been set aside, waiting for the board to make a decision whether to pay it.
I move to pay it.
I'm gonna recuse myself 1 second. Just let me sign those.
I talked to Amy Questle, so I moved to pay it.
Why did we refuse to say that?
Pardon?
Why did we refuse?
I think there was a question about the work that was going on and whether it needed to be done by different attorneys and such.
And who was working on it, so I talked to Amy first. So I now move to pay it.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
On the legislative redistricting, Representative Lenatra had responded to the board's hope that the town not be split between 2 House districts, indicating she had thought the townspeople would have more support at the State House if Halifax had 2 members representing it. The legislature went with a plan that did split, so we'll have Precinct 1, which is in the southern part of Halifax, in 1 House legislative district, which I believe would be probably Ms. Lenatra's, and then the other, I believe it would be in Cutler's district. The north is Precinct 2 and attaches to the other communities that he's representing right now. We would still be in the district for the Senate that Senator Brady represents, and I believe the congressional districts that just came out, it was yesterday, we'd still be in Keating's district. So that's where things stand right now. Aldana Road land transfers. We're getting closer to the end of this. We need approvals for the transfer of parcel B to the state and then the sliver to the town. What do we got here? These are So we still need to get everything filed at the registry. After this is done, we need the signatures from the state concerning the deeds, but we're getting much, much closer to the transfer of both of those parcels.
Is there a motion to approve transfer of parcel B?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
And then also we'll need a separate vote to approve acceptance of the sliver from the state.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Elementary school air conditioning assessment, I guess there was a kickoff meeting the last couple of weeks that Matt Durkee organized. This is to review the possibility of putting HVAC units in all the classrooms along with the spaces in this elementary school that are not currently air conditioned.
So there's a question over usage of ARPA funds, and we need to set up a meeting with Tom O'Brien to see how to move forward with it. But the board did previously vote to go forward with that assessment.
Recording secretary, the board should make a decision whether to set a wage rate via a graded position or ungraded position, or basically a meeting stipend or per hour rate. The finance committee would also have to concur. Funding would have to come from the reserve fund via finance committee approval, and the board would also need to do the recruitment and hiring process.
Do you or Pam have a recommendation?
Well, considering that we have, go ahead.
I'm thinking that it should be an hourly wage.
An hourly?
Yeah, instead of a stipend.
Okay.
Because our meetings, they fluctuate, so it's only an hour, we get someone 170. I don't think that, I think that'd be tough.
Okay.
This is the only job that I've been doing for this day come along, with a decent wage, and I think it should be on.
Okay.
You may want to make it an ungraded position without a step system. We have a number of positions, like youth and rec director, for instance, is an ungraded. Pam had provided you with some tables from surveys that were done during the last year, showing some, and they're all, it's not that you're going to be paying $40 an hour, but it's not a consistent, everybody pays $16 an hour or something like that. You're going to need to obviously pay somebody enough to be willing to
Do the
take the
time.
job. But,
Is this something we should vote with finance committee?
well, both of you are going to need to approve the same amount. And Finance Committee will be meeting again next Monday on the 15th.
Okay.
Should we do a dual meeting?
I can set it up that
Yeah.
way. Sure.
That way we both vote the same thing.
Let me do that. I'll get it posted for you all and tell them you're coming and try and get a time specific so that people aren't waiting around.
Okay.
Town official meeting attendee code of conduct. This is open for discussion by the board.
I think we should invite Jack in for this.
Okay.
And I think we have a 5:45, right?
So we got here. Yep.
Yep. Okay, we've got the chair of the Halifax and the other member.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to your board tonight. So I come to you as chair of the Halifax Elementary School Committee requesting that you consider a stipend for the employees in the school department. It's come to our understanding that there was a stipend granted to some of the town employees who worked through COVID using ARPA funds, I believe, and I just came to request the same be given to the school as their department of the town.
I feel differently with what happened with the town employees than I do with the school. The school basically shut down. The town didn't. The town continued to work. Every department stayed open. So I feel completely differently over, the school was given, and the teachers were given 10 days off from teaching the students last year. So I feel completely different on this issue. The town department stayed open. Police and fire kept going. Town clerk's office was open. Board of Health office was open. The assessors were open. Everybody else had to show up to work. So I don't feel the same with the school.
Well, we're also trying to work to get the school air conditioned to be able to help them if they're gonna be continuing to wear masks, which more than likely they're going to. So I feel like we are contributing our funds to the school and the employees and the children and the community. We just did it in a different way.
Okay, I can understand that.
Okay.
I honestly, I mean, I can see both perspectives. I just felt like being a department of the town that, and I have to say that, you know, our custodians definitely really stepped up to the plate big time, and I think our teachers did to some respect, having to change their teaching style and go through the motions of adapting to, you know, the climate. Just thought it was appropriate for me to come before you guys and ask you.
Yeah, I think the town stepped up with the CARES Act funding. We funded air purifiers at the school. We funded HVAC system upgrades. We funded Chromebooks for every student. We funded laptops for every teacher. We hired long-term subs so that they could implement a remote teaching hybrid program.
You also
We-
hired us an extra custodian.
Yeah, we hired another custodian, and we had a building sub too in the building. So I think the town stepped up for the school system. So I'm not in support of, all the other departments had to pitch in a different way, where the town, other employees had to continue to go about their job, and I just don't feel like I'm in support of it.
Okay. So can I take this opportunity to thank this board for utilizing a decent amount of the CARES Act funding that was given to this town, to our children and our professionals in that building, because that was incredible. And frankly, we wouldn't have been able to go back to putting our kids even into a hybrid model if we didn't have the ability to work together as a town, and we didn't have the support of this board to spend that funding on our building. So I'm very grateful for that, and I'm pretty sure I can speak on behalf of our committee and probably everybody in that building that we appreciate you keeping that in your wheelhouse when you were allocating those funds. So thank you for that. And I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to just come before your board tonight.
But, Mr. Millius?
I think you folks were very generous with your stipends. You even gave it to people that weren't working for the town during the COVID period and ignored anybody else who was working for the town during the COVID period. I think there's some questions to be asked about some of that.
Okay, thank you.
Ready to move on?
Is there anything else, Emma?
I just wanted to, I heard you mention something about the AC and the ARPA funding for the building being in question.
Yeah.
If you could include me when you meet with Tom O'Brien, I would appreciate it, just so I'm kept in the loop so I can bring it back to our committee. Matt Durkee's been pretty good about keeping me in the loop anyway, but if you don't mind,
Okay.
when you set that meeting, if you could notify me, I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
So on number 12, you have a 6 o'clock, but we'll get there in a few minutes. Fob system, we're skipping over. I think if there's any need to discuss fob and security, we'll be doing it in an executive
Yep.
session. Water department building relocation, that's going to be discussed at another time. Steve Hayward is going to be meeting with the water department, I believe, next week, and then coming back to the board at a later date. Recycling abatements, we have 51 what I would consider normal requests. We had one additional request made for fiscal '21 due to the bill not having been issued by the time the certificate of municipal lien had been issued for the sale of the house. The resident has sent us the letter from a private hauler showing that they've been a customer of the hauler since 2020. Given the board's past practice on issues such as that, I would recommend approval of that along with the 51 normal requests. Do want to note that the deadline was yesterday, November 1st. Everything should be up to date at this point. I'm not sure if there are any outstanding sort of, somebody sent in the application, but we don't have the letter or vice versa.
2 or 3, but they will still be on it because.
They got it in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get them to get it to us.
Is there a motion to approve the 51 for FY22?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion to approve the FY21 recycling abatement request? Bill number
952.
952.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay.
On the turkey swap, do we have all the documents available?
Everything's all set.
Does the board need to do anything at this point?
I've never.
Well, officially that they would-
Approval, but do they vote on?
Yeah, I mean,
I
if-
did all the paperwork and they
So, I mean, we've gotten something from our engineer
We did. Oh, yeah.
saying everything's
Yeah,
by the
it's
book.
in that packet from last
Okay.
week.
So the board could approve basically the final closure of the project.
Yeah,
Do we owe them any money at this
we
point?
did that.
Just
with the
voted
work
that.
We just voted that.
So,
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Yeah, unanimous.
We had public records policy on the board's agenda, so
Yeah,
it's
so
open
we
discussion.
we
by
had
the board.
discussed at the last meeting, public records procedures. So if we had request for emails, we were gonna send that to IT through the town administrator. When there are legal matters, all the requests need to be sent to our law firm to review to make sure that we are in compliance with the public records law. So any matters where litigation could take place, those public records should be dealt with in the same manner, then sent to legal for review. And that's what we discussed at the last meeting. I just want to make sure we took a vote on that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So what if we don't know that there's a legal matter? Like, I'm not aware of all lawsuits to the town of Halifax, so if someone makes a request to me, I have no way of knowing.
So I think we need to make sure that there's an updated list to let you know.
Okay.
We can handle that. So, Charlie, do you want us to have a vote?
Yes, that would be helpful.
Okay, so the records request will go through the records officer. Any emails will go through the IT director or the IT department to pull the emails. Any matters with possible litigation will be sent to the town attorney for review to make sure that we're in compliance.
And assume for the emails that the emails would then go back to the RAO in the sense of, for instance, if we have a records request, Caesar may or not reviewing each of the individual emails
Right.
to see if there's any confidential information
Yeah.
on there. So for instance, we might have an email with people's cell phone numbers, which is not a matter of public record, where, for instance, the office number is, but then all that information goes back to the RAO for
Yeah,
review.
for redactions. Yep,
So I will second your motion.
okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Gordon's going to bring back the executive session
Yeah, I
minutes.
gotta bring back this meeting minutes.
So we have a public records request by Thomas Milius. Mr. Milius had requested a number of public records from the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Planning Board, and the Building Inspector. Building Inspector and the Board of Selectmen. The only material that needs to be redacted are the detailed pages from the invoices filed by Brooks and Durensis for July, August, and September 2021. There's a summary page that simply has a list of amounts for each type of, this case costs $100, this case costs $200. It doesn't say what the attorney did. There's no information about strategy, for instance, for the town. The rest of the material does not fall under one of the exemptions. It took about 30 minutes for the staff of the ZBA and the selectmen to produce their records. I haven't heard back yet from the building inspector. The board can provide an estimate of the cost to Mr. Mears, wait for a confirmation he'll pay, and then tell him the records are available once he's paid. Deadline for the request to the selectmen is tomorrow, November 3rd. Deadline for the request to the ZBA and building inspectors, Monday, November 8th.
Charlie, somebody just went in your office.
Okay, I'll check. Thank you.
And she walked back down the hall and but just, you
They
know.
may be looking for comment.
Okay.
When you guys take a pause, can I ask a question about recycling? I didn't feel a second to
Sure.
interject. Yeah,
Yep, is that
Okay.
about the abatements?
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm curious as to why you don't apply for a recycling permit, but you have to get an abatement. Like, why does it go that way? Why doesn't it go the other way? Why do I have to file an abatement? Why can't I just, if I want recycling, I pay for it? Why am I stuck having to go through the process of that?
We've gone through this a number of times, and the town has to provide a recycling service.
Yeah, but we do.
Right, so the funds for recycling come out of the recycling fee. There's only a small portion, Sandy can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's only a small portion, like the hazardous waste day, that's being funded out of taxes right now. The rest is all funded by recycling.
Right, so if you want recycling, can't you pay for it?
Yeah, so right now it's a debate that's been happening for the last couple of years on how to go forward with funding that.
Well, either way, you're gonna pay, you either pay the private hauler, or pay
Yeah.
for the town.
Right, so mine's rolled into my trash bill. They just give me 2 roll carts. I'm like, great, but I always forget to file the abatement.
So you can't use the recycling center
I
unless...
don't ever, I don't. I
So-
just wondered why I went that way and not the other way. If I want to use it, why can't, isn't that a permit I purchase? Why isn't, if I want curbside recycling, why can't I purchase that through the town and
It's just the way it's been handled, and we can take that up at a later time.
I'm sure there's a method to the madness. I just was curious to.
Okay.
Thank you.
So next up, we have a proposal from the town clerk.
We didn't make a decision.
Make a
I
decision.
didn't know if you wanted, were
Oh,
running any
I thought
direction
you were
about
just-
19.
If you're gonna act on that.
Well, I didn't know
think
if
the
it-
board's acting on it.
I mean, there's nothing that I can see for the board to act on, but if the board wanted to do something, I wanted to make sure the board was aware of the request.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so Susan.
Good, no, Gordon just asked me to get a quote, so I did.
Okay. Well, but it's a quote for electronic
Yep,
devices.
electronic
These would be
quoting,
these would be handheld devices, so people could push a button and say yes or no. And then the idea is there's some sort of counter, electronic counter. It goes up on a screen saying, yes 59, no 20, or something like that.
It seems I had put a call into them to find out like more details about the software that would be needed for it.
Okay.
But it would run just about under 6,000. You're not looking for the money at this point. The plan would be, whether it's this system or another system, we'd probably bring an article at a future town meeting. That'll cover it
What do you want?
So it's about 6,000?
for this proposal, yeah.
This one,
Yeah.
the other guy didn't get back.
Is this the system that they use that you liked in Hanover, or?
No, I haven't actually, we went to a different link where they showed how it worked, but I haven't
Okay.
actually seen it in action.
Okay.
These rent or purchase?
This is to purchase.
Purchase, wow, it come down quite a bit.
There's only five, I think there's like 200.
Yeah, it was 200 plus the whatever other software and the other pieces of hardware you needed.
Okay.
Okay, process for hiring a town administrator. We want to leave that open for discussion by the board.
So I know that we could put together a committee to do interview process. We can reach out to the Collins for interim or another
Right.
like firm. What's your opinion, Joe?
Well, the screening committee works well, at least it worked well for when we hired Charlie. It's made up of some of the town officials as well as the public. I think Pam, I think the clerk, Sandy Nolan, be involved in it, and a citizen, Barbara.
If we have to.
So this is not for an interim? Because we need to hire an interim to,
Yeah, the screening committee could go through the whole process.
for a full hire?
For an interim, many times what you do is you'll do it yourself, put out a recruitment ad, or you'll contact the Collins Center, or you'll contact, is it Paragon Management that does both interim and permanent installations. There may be 2 or 3 other firms out there. Basically, whoever you would choose would very rapidly get an ad out. You probably want to make sure you've got your job description. You also need to, not right at the moment you're posting, but before you hire someone, figure out what you want that person to do or not do, and what you think the expected timetable is going to be like. Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 6 months? What your expectations are, so that the person coming in also knows ahead of time. And then, the hiring firm can help on that too.
I think before we do the screening proposal, the board should talk about the interim and what do you want to do?
We can go through the same firm for that, Charlie just said, right?
Right,
We
so-
would same
so
firm
we
to
should-
start both processes.
So do we want to have someone come in from each one of those places and talk about their process?
I think that's a great idea. And we could ask them about
How
both.
many is there?
There's at least 2, there may be 3 or 4, I can check. I can contact the Mass Municipal Association, for instance.
I'd like to hear what that process is, what it's gonna cost, all of those figures. before we do that.
It'd probably get a different set of costs for the interim versus the permanent position.
We have someone in the audience.
So I did reach out to a few other communities just to see people that have recently hired town
Yeah.
administrators and have like a sample engagement agreement that Wenham had. I just happen to have it online. But there were 2 that Community Paradigm was Whitman, East Bridgewater, and Plimpton used them, and
Rochester's using them right
Municipal
now.
Resources. They're out of Meredith, New Hampshire, but Hanson, Hanover, and Grafton use them.
Okay.
So maybe if we talk to those 2.
You want me to try and line something up for the
Yeah,
night, see
go
if
on.
people can come in?
See if we can get someone from the MMA as well. Okay.
Well, I mean, the MMA wouldn't be doing,
Right, but they're not the MMA itself, but the association where they post out. Because there's a town administrator division, correct?
well, there's a managers association, right, but they don't handle recruitment or anything. I mean, I can check and see whether they have people to come out to talk to towns boards or doing transitions and see if somebody's available.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. You had a public records request from Amy Troop. She requested all emails between myself, Terry Renaud, Holly Mary, or the Conservation Commission for a period of time back in 2020. The estimate is this contains 800 pages of material, which would need to be reviewed by the town council, which would be about 2 hours, along with search and review by the town administrator. That would take about an hour. Total would be about $75. Payment up front would be needed before work begins. Because Ms. Troop has not paid for a public records request from last year, she approved the search parameters for that request and the estimated cost of $200. The work was completed, but she never paid. Obviously, the documents were never given to her.
Okay. So we have next,
Nor'easter storm of the 26th. So the fire chief and the town of Halifax asked for expense reports, and I've emphasized to the departments to document. Even if we end up being told no to a certain expense, it makes more sense to apply for it and document it and put it in rather than not do it at all. I believe, see, it's in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I listened to a FEMA or MEMA call for the fire chief, and they said that they're still trying to find out if the state is going to qualify for FEMA money, and they're going to do it by county. So the FEMA wants the information from MEMA within like the second week of November. So we need to have all our information into MEMA by November 9th.
okay.
So the chief has contacted all the departments, asked for estimates. Obviously, the department that's going to be hit the hardest is our highway department and the debris removal. And that's going to go on for a while. So it will be an estimate of about how much overtime.
Okay.
Usually FEMA only reimburses overtime, so.
So they won't pay out contractors if Steve had a higher
They
contract?
will
will.
reimburse them for the contractors as long as certain parameters were met, and I talked with Steve, and those parameters were met, and it
Okay.
was monitored while the contractor was working, so.
Okay. Because it seems like there's going to be a lot of chipping that needs to be done for probably a month or so.
I heard that they were looking to see if they could do like an emergency burning permit to burn some of it, so I don't know where that's going.
Okay.
One of the things I do recommend is that the fire chief, maybe Tony Regan from the Council on Aging and the board, have a follow-up session at some point.
To talk about the issue.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we continue to have problems with electricity with the town. we know we're at the end of National Grid. I mean, mind you, we were ahead still of a lot of the communities in Plymouth County, luckily, in terms of the power outage and restoration, but also in terms of providing services to residents, whether we need to rethink our self-shelter model, or simply providing services at home, because there may be some inadequacies. It's not that people didn't do their best, they did their best with what we had. The question is whether we could be doing more than what we were able to do. That's all.
Okay.
Is there anything else, Sandy, that we should be thinking about the storm? Let's see, Inspector of Buildings, Kimberly Spencer of the Mass Office of Public Safety Inspections had informed me that the town's required to have an inspector of buildings, not just a building inspector. Jim Perry's currently the building inspector, but does not have the necessary certifications to be an inspector of buildings. Chris Carmichael, who's the alternate building inspector, does have those credentials, which is why the board had appointed him several months ago, so the town would have someone to conduct the necessary inspections and approvals for certificates of occupancy.
We're going to talk about this one. I do recuse myself still.
Chris Carmichael had agreed to accept the Inspector of Buildings designation with the acknowledgement that his duties would be limited to the handling of the certificates of occupancy, just as he's doing now. The board could appoint him tonight or refer the matter to town council for review and guidance and hold this over to November 9th.
I thought we had already appointed him for like the year.
You did as alternate building inspector, but what the state is telling me is that you
They want to change the wording.
Well, yeah, officially you need an inspector of buildings. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are, and this is one possible solution would be
What's the cost?
It wouldn't be a cost in the sense of any more than we're paying him now on an hourly basis to do the work he's doing right now. To me, this is simply a change of the name for the office he's holding. We're not asking him to undertake any other duties besides those he's undertaken now, but I'm happy to refer it to council for one more review.
I prefer that.
Yep, that's fine.
Last one,
Yeah. I was going to say, didn't we advertise for an inspector of buildings, building commissioner, and now we're paying somebody $70,000 a year for that position? And now you're saying that that person cannot perform the duties? Is that what I'm hearing? I just want to be clear. We're paying $70,000 a year to somebody who can't do the job, correct? Am I wrong? Can someone tell me?
He needs one more certification to do what he needs to do. And he is in the process of
He has
getting
his
it.
local inspectors already? If he does not, he needs two levels of certification.
Which he had a year to get, correct?
he has a year to get the local inspector. It may take longer than that to get the necessary certifications for inspector of buildings.
So now we're paying somebody else in addition to perform the functions that that person cannot do, that you advertised for, and apparently hired somebody that did not fulfill the requirements of that advertisement.
Weren't we already doing so? Yes.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was talking to the board.
We're already doing so. Last year, the year before.
Okay, I think we should stop this conversation before it goes anywhere else it needs to.
The board's okay. I'll
So
move
I
on to
didn't
next.
get an answer. We
We're
are
stopping
paying
the
somebody for a
conversation.
position that he cannot fulfill.
We're gonna stop the conversation right now, thank you.
Change is good, thank you. Change is good. We just don't listen to anybody anymore. That's the change.
Okay.
Nicely done.
So on House 878 recycling bill, the proposed legislation would require sellers of products to shoulder a larger portion of the cost of recycling materials. Obviously, someone always has to pay one way or the other. The hope is that having this revert back to the producers of the materials, that the amount of materials that's used in packaging, et cetera, would be lessened because they'd have an economic encouragement to do so. Susan Johnson, our recycling coordinator, has asked for the board to send a letter of support to our delegation. I believe I gave you a copy of the legislation also.
You guys want to send a letter of support?
Yep, so moved.
Second. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay.
So you have two hearings, one at 6:30 and one at 7:30.
Is anyone from Conservation here?
Oh, sorry.
No? All right. I'll have to carry it over.
Okay, I'll get it on the 9th.
15 minutes to go into executive session.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two,
Okay, excuse me,
Stop.
please stop.
Stop.
I have two matters under the union negotiations, and also the board wanted to go in on security, and we have one other legal matter under that. I believe it's listed in the board's
Okay.
agenda.
Can you guys make those motions separately?
For executive session?
Yes, please.
I move to go into executive session to discuss contract negotiations for patrol officers and highway, and to discuss the deployment of security personnel or devices or strategies with respect thereto, as discussing a strategy with respect to collective bargaining in an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the town. So that's the first motion, and then I'll do
Okay.
the second one.
Is there,
Second.
all those in favor, Ashley?
Yes.
Troy?
Yes.
Myself, yes.
And then I will motion to go into executive session to discuss Curtin Brothers versus zoning board of appeals / town of Halifax. As discussing strategy with respect to litigation and open meeting may have detrimental effect on the litigating purpose of the town, position of the town.
Second.
So I'm going to recuse from that because my father owns an abutting property.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Just roll call for that, too. That's all. Okay.
So recuse.
And we'll be back, we're hoping to be back by 6:30. It shouldn't take that long. And we'll be back returning open session.
Can I ask a question? With our wonderful town administrator deciding to move on, is the board going to do something to recognize his service to the town, like a coffee hour or something like that? Do you plan
We haven't
on that?
discussed it as a board yet, but I'm sure it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting.
All right, thanks. He only has 2 weeks or so left.
All right, we're going to ask you guys to clear the room so we can have the executive session.
So you guys can be back after.
Yeah, we have the 6:30, we have the hearings.
Upstairs.
Or downstairs, depending on, there may be doing holidays in Halifax.
Oh, that's the only thing that's left.
Is it supposed to be canceled?
Okay, well, somebody came for it.
God, I'm getting old.
What's the hearing on?
So we have the two hearings. One is for elevated routes at 6:30, and then at 7:30 we have Cannabis. So elevated routes is the old Santander Bank building.
Yeah.
Presentation of the board, and now we're doing the public forum. And then the 7:30 is the one down at the end of Halifax.
If we go to the background slide, the next slide. When we went through the process in Kingston, initially when we came into town, the...
Pause 1 second. Susan,
Yep.
can you hit admit and go to the next slide?
I can slow it.
And then you got an admit.
Where are we?
The person trying to come in needs to be admitted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
No worries.
4 devices here.
Well, we appreciate the effort. And then I think we're just back one slide, Caesar, on slide 5. So when we talk about being a good corporate citizen and being responsive to the community's feedback, when we look at our experience in Kingston, when we initially went there, they had a ban in place for adult use cannabis completely. We worked with the town, we worked with the neighbors, we did extensive community outreach process. We met with the select board several times. It was a very long process with a lot of community engagement. And when it was all said and done, we were able to get permitted and licensed through the CCC a co-located retail, cultivation, and manufacturing facility. So all 3 of those are in one building. Probably the thing we're most proud of is, as with any other town, there was some opposition to the town even allowing for adult use cannabis. And what we're really proud of is on the last night when the board was voting to issue Elevated Roots and ACA, the folks who had really kind of spearheaded the opposition to the idea of having cannabis in the town, but not really directed at Elevated Roots, said, give them the effort Elevated Roots has had here. If it's going to go to anybody, we want to go to them. And those were the folks that really didn't want cannabis in Kingston. So that really tells the story of how, what we mean by being a good corporate citizen, listening to the neighbors. We moved our location in Kingston because the first one the neighbors just didn't like. So we did a lot to do that. We would do the same here. So I just think that's a good example, and that kind of summarizes what's on this slide here. But it's a good example in practice of how we've operated here in Massachusetts, and really almost right next door. So next slide, Caesar, slide 6. We think one of our biggest benefits to the town is our ability to open the business quickly, which really just means a quicker path to revenue generation. As you may remember from when we met last time, a couple of significant things. So we're a minority-owned business. Barsnab Khan, who's in the back, is one of the owners, so we're classified at the CCC as a minority-owned business. We are already operational, so we've been through the hurdles. We know what the hoops are. We know how to execute against those, and we're funded to do the project. And those are really 3 of the main things that will move quickly to get this open. I think the other one that's significant is we really intend to reuse the existing building as you see it today, and that does a couple of things. One, the community knows what to expect when it's going to be done. It fits in well with where we're going because we're really not making changes externally to it. Certainly the inside will change, and it really gives folks an idea of what they're going to have when they finish, but before they start. So those are some of the things that will really help us get to revenue generating much more quickly, rather than full remodel or tearing it down and doing something else. So those we think are some of the significant benefits to this proposal for the town to consider. So with that, we'll be on the next slide, Caesar, for Meet the Team. With me, Robert Palma, Bobby, and Barsnab Khan, who is sitting right there. They're the 2 owners. Bobby's Kingston resident. Interesting story, I won't spend too much time on it, but he really built his business from the ground up, starting in his mother's garage, much like many of the greats in our society. But he owns one of the largest dental labs here in Massachusetts. He's the owner of Elevated Roots in Kingston, along with Barsnab. And so really good, strong backgrounds, both locally in the community and as business owners and as cannabis operators. And then Barsnab, as I mentioned, is the other owner. He's the principal owner of Roshan Group, which you may have seen his company before. It's Richdale Foods. If you've driven around Massachusetts, they have about 80 locations and 400 employees in that business, along with the Elevated Roots business that he is also the owner of. So both are, work in a lot of communities. Many of Barsnab's locations sell adult use products, and as well as obviously the operational cannabis facility. So let's talk about that. The next slide, Caesar, slide 8. So this is a picture. I'll just wait a second. One more, sir. There we go. So this is our facility in Kingston. It's been operational since April 7th. The left, as you're looking at the picture here, the left side is the retail store, so you can kind of see the white frosted windows. That's just to comply with the CCC requirements for product not being visible from the street. The far left, you'll see a little square window. That's our security window. And then our man trap is entered through the doors that are on the left. You walk in. Your ID is checked before you can enter the actual facility. Once somebody verifies who you are, we use ID scanners that check for fraudulent ID, so on and so forth. You then go into the facility, which I'll show you inside here in just a moment. Once you're inside, there's bud tenders. We have iPads where you can self-order if you know what you're there for. We use online ordering through Dutchie, which is a popular app that retail stores use. If we could just go back one more, Caesar. I'm sorry, I'm almost through it. And so that's our retail store. The door in the middle of the building is the exit from the facility. It also works as a man trap, so somebody couldn't come in that door and into the facility. It really flows one way. And then you'll see our logo there, and then the right side. So the right side of that building is our corporate headquarters, administrative offices, where all our normal business functions operate, HR, anything you can think of. So we're right down the road here in Kingston. Interestingly, and you can't see it from this picture, but the back part of this building is about 20,000 square feet plus or minus, and the entire backside is our cultivation and product manufacturing, which is currently under construction. So we're operational on the retail and corporate headquarters side and constructing on the cultivation manufacturing. All full-time employees right now, we have about 28. We did that purposely so that we could provide benefits and other things for the employees and offer a good paying job that provides what they would need. We certainly hire local folks, part of our security team are local firefighters. I think we talked about in our presentation last time, we started in April with zero, and we're about 10,000 customers a month. So it's really going well. We're not having issues with lines or people waiting outside. Since April, we've generated about $100,000 in tax revenue for the town of Kingston and about another $100,000 in host community impact fees. So in a very short time, it's generated quite a bit of revenue for the town. So that's been really good for them. And we have a great relationship with the town. We highlight local businesses through our social media. Anytime we can incorporate a local business in something we're doing, we do that, and we've had a lot of success with that. We're currently in the process of planning future days of service for our staff where they go out and do things within the community while they're getting paid, but they're working, maybe it's cleaning a park, whatever the case may be. So that's something we're working with the town. And one of the bullets that you just can't see on the slide, but is included in the presentation, on Memorial Day, we donated 5% of all our revenue to the Kingston Veterans Committee. No request from the town, not part of our HCA. It's just something that we thought was the right thing to do. So I think those are kind of the things that kind of demonstrate how we like to work with the town. No one asked us to do it. It wasn't required. It was just something that we thought was important. So that is our facility from the outside. Caesar, if we could go to the next slide, please. This is the facility, obviously, with no customers in it. You may have seen other retail stores that you visited that look similar to this, not cannabis related. We have glass cases. The product is all secured below the glass so people can view it as they're walking around. They can't select it, like pick it up and take it with them to check out, but they can view it and they can see what the different offerings are. You'll see the security door that you came in is now the door on the right. The exit is the door on the left. The other door that's partially open just goes to the administrative area. But very clean presentation. On the far left, you'll see a couple of iPads. That's the self-service ordering. If you know what you want, you can go over there and order. We also have folks on the floor that are answering questions. They may take your order on an iPad, or you can order on the Dutchie app. So that's just a little bit of overview of how we're operating there. Caesar, if we could do the next slide. So the proposed location, 319 Monopoisett, 3,600 square feet, includes about 23 parking spaces on site. It's a single-use property, meaning there's no other businesses on the parcel. We're not touching any other companies. It's a standalone building. It was previously used as a bank, which obviously lends itself to converting to cannabis facility pretty clearly. A good example of that, if you may remember, the Brookline store, Netta had a Brookline store. That was a bank that they converted, and they've had a lot of success with that. So it's another example of converting a bank to adult use retail cannabis store. And then on the zoning is all compliant. It meets all the buffer requirements, commercially zoned, all the things that the town requires. And there's no direct residential butters, which we think is also a really good benefit. So if I could get the next slide, sir. I'm yelling at Caesar across the room here. So we're just in the top right corner, just to we took a backup view so you can get a sense of flavor for the area. I'm sure most of the folks visiting and watching at home know where this is. On the corner 58 and 106, across from Walmart, Stop and Shop. Very commercial area. We think it's a very appropriate location for this type of use. Traffic will be similar to a bank, and it will, certainly facilitates ingress and egress from the parking lot. We'll get into that a little bit more on these next slides. So if I could, Caesar, get the next slide. This is just a top-down view that you don't generally get to see just driving by, but you see how the bank works now. There's really two entrances with some angled parking in what would be the back of our store to the right there. You go around the building, some additional parking, and then the front entrance would, in this case, be, as we're looking at the left side of the building, so where it is now, that would move, but it wouldn't be facing the street where the trees are. If you could go next slide, sir. So this is just a street view as you're going by the facility for those who haven't been by it in a while. This is what it looks like today, aside from being cleaned up, so on and so forth. This is what it will look like when we're done, which we think is a great benefit to the town. Next slide, please.
Could you just...
Yep.
So if you had the same setup where you'd have a secure door, entrance and exit,
yeah,
what were you looking to do on that? So right now the entrance and exit is on that side of the bank that you can't see.
Caesar, can you go back one slide? Thanks.
And that entrance is really only used for the people that park on that side of the building?
Right. That would not be used.
That's not going to be used.
Correct. Right.
Okay.
So there's another slide that shows the side door that you're talking about a little bit better, so we can go through that. If when we get there, just so we have something we're looking at. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's fine.
All right. So we're ready for the next slide, Caesar. This is just an angle coming down the road, looking the other way, if you will. Very, very large parking area, very accessible to vehicles in and out, good lines of sight, the whole 9 yards. And then if we could go next slide, Caesar. This, in a way, shows the door you were talking about, Mr. Chairman. So the way this is going to work is everybody will come in and out of that door for the purposes of security. But when they step into that door, there'll be a vestibule with two doors. So there'll be a vestibule door. Well, security will meet you there, check your ID, do the ID scanning, so on and so forth. But then the security will be managing both the entrance and exit. So people entering the building will go to the left. As people are coming out, they will come in from the right. But that'll all be managed internally to the structure, if you will. Okay. From the outside, this is what you would see. So you would just see people coming and going from that one door. Okay. Whether they entered or exited, you may not even know, just because that would be handled in a vestibule inside. Okay. And security would manage that. Yeah. Much in the way we do now in Kingston. We have two separate doors, but security buzzes folks in. So it's still managed by a person today in our other store. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so we're ready for the next slide, please. Project benefit, we talked about this kind of in the opening, so I won't beat you over the head with it, but we do think the very limited amount of construction we would need to do, we're keeping the vault, we're going to repurpose it, so extensive construction like that isn't going to occur. This is really just an upfit, compliant bathrooms, things like that, maybe some updates that would need to be done from a code perspective. Very central location in the commercial zone. We talked about quickly getting to revenue, which we think is something that is beneficial to the town. And then certainly the town's ability, certainly the board, but other members of the public can visit our Kingston store. And we think that's a great benefit because people can go evaluate it for themselves. We wouldn't know who they were. They can go through the experience and kind of see how we operate, which we certainly welcome the board or anybody else from the town to go, and including the residents to go and learn about that. And then the next slide, please. This is where we'll just get into a little bit of the security. We talked a lot about the operational security with people coming and going. Security really goes much further than just, it doesn't maybe on the face of it seem it. Security, a lot of times we think of cameras and entry and exit points, that type of physical security. But there's a lot more kind of behind the scenes that goes into our security. So we have security policies, certainly, that would talk about those physical security things. But we also do a lot with prevention of diversion of marijuana or to minors or the illicit market. So we have policies about that. We have very strict policies on restricting access to age 21 or older, really duplicative ID checks. So it's checked before you enter, but it's also checked at the point of sale. So it's really, you couldn't play some silly game. I don't even know what the game would be, but those things all speak to security. Your retail dispensing procedures are certainly an aspect of our security and how we dispense product. You saw in our current store, there's not just things out there for people to take and walk out the door with. It's all under secured glass, and that all falls under our retail dispensing procedures. Our personnel policies are certainly part of our security. We talk about background checks, training, things like that. That's all in those policies. Storage of marijuana, certainly very heavily regulated by the CCC. Not much we can improve on there, but we do address it in our policies. And then we talk about transportation and on-site deliveries to and from the marijuana establishment. So when we're talking about that, what we mean is our inventory coming to the store for the purposes of us selling it. We're not talking about deliveries to residents. That's not an element of this proposal. And that's all part of our security. Okay, next slide. Diversion prevention, we use what we call the SMART approach. You see the acronym there: separation, marketing, access control, reporting, and training. I won't read all the words to you on the screen. I know most of you have this, and certainly it's available on the town's website. But what this talks about is, I know it's no pun intended, but when you think of a bank, I think we talked about this actually at the last meeting. When you go in there, the folks working at the desk, helping open accounts, do mortgages, whatever the case may be, they don't necessarily have access to a teller drawer, and they wouldn't necessarily have access to safety deposit box or the vault, because their job doesn't require it. And then as you move kind of through the access criteria, the next one would be the teller, who would have access to their drawer, but not necessarily the vault and safety deposit box, so on and so forth. So cannabis stores in Massachusetts, all of them, quite frankly, but certainly ours, work very much the same way. So your role for that day is your access for that day. So for an example, if you're working out on the sales floor and you're helping people place orders and giving recommendations, whatever the case may be, you wouldn't on that day necessarily have access to the register or the order fulfillment or the vault. And your role can change depending on how the scheduling works. Maybe you have half shift on the floor, half shift up back. But it's not a free for all. It's not just coming and going. Like a great example, we've all bought shoes and they're in and out of the back with the shoes, right? It's not that kind of experience. So that's what we mean when we talk about separation. And that also I kind of bundled in access control, where the way we implement the separation is through access control. So our doors have door swipes, and they're assigned to an employee into a role. So that will let the employee into the doors that are required for that day. And if they came in the next day and they had a different role, then the security would, the access would change. So it's all computerized. You can audit it. We can know who went through what door at what time, how long the door was open. All those kind of protections are in place. When we talk about marketing, Massachusetts may be the most restrictive in the country for marketing. It's very limited in what you can and can't do. Certainly, we're going to comply with all those regulations. The short version of the story is you can't do any Joe Camel stuff or anything like that that lends itself to minors. You laugh because we all remember that from years ago. But that's in a nutshell what the CCC requires. Certainly, we couldn't do any marketing that would jeopardize public health, welfare, safety, anything like that. So it's very straightforward what we can do, and the CCC monitors it closely. They do monitor social media of these facilities as well, and they'll call you if a post goes up that they think's not correct. So there's a very high level of oversight there. We talked about access control reporting. This is all covered in our regulations. It's typically included by reference in a host community agreement. There's a litany of items that if they happen, we have 24 hours to report them, all covered in the regulations, but certainly any inventory discrepancies, something like that would all be reported to the CCC and the town. We're familiar with this. We had, I think, 2 alarms go off so far. If you know our location in Kingston, you'll know they're building the Amazon facility next door. Jackhammering set off the motion alarms in the middle of the night. That's a reportable event, even though no one was there. Police came out, checked the facility, obviously it was secure. And then the town's water backed up out on the street and caused a backflow pressure for our fire alarm suppression system. So again, we've been through that. They weren't related to cannabis, but nonetheless, we're familiar with the reporting to the CCC and the town and how that process works. We've been through it a couple times for things unrelated to cannabis, but nonetheless still reportable. And then finally, the training. covered in the regulations, covered more extensively in our policies and procedures. This really goes to diversion prevention, checking IDs, assessing people, making sure people are intoxicated when they're on site, just like you would a liquor store or a bar, anything like that. Same kind of responsibilities, if you will. So that's really the overview of the diversion prevention. And then finally, the next slide, Caesar, if you would, is the community impact. We talked a lot about this tonight, so I won't regurgitate it, but the partnership with the town, I gave you a couple good examples of how we've done that successfully in one of your neighboring communities. We would work equally as hard here to have that positive impact in the community, both economically and otherwise. Security, we spent quite a bit of time on that tonight. It's a very collaborative process with the town. We typically will draft what we'll call a CCC compliant plan. We'll sit with the chief, go over it. They may have some suggestions. Typically, it ends up being adding a camera here or something to that effect. Once we all have an understanding of what we'd like to see approved, we submit it to the CCC. They're the actual approval authority for those things. If they recommended any changes, we would come back to the chief and say, hey, this is what the CCC wants, whatever. So it's a very collaborative process. It just has to be. And then the dialogue. We started the dialogue at the last meeting with the select board, as you may remember, introducing ourselves and the project to the town. We're before you again tonight, both for your public forum for the town as well as the community outreach meeting purposes. And it's just an ongoing process. Hopefully you'll invite us back for a HCA discussion, and we'll be able to do that. And as we're going through the process, permitting, local hearings, there's a lot of opportunities for the public to weigh in, learn what we're doing, and we'll continue to do that. So, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn it back over for questions.
Well, I asked my question that early, so. Troy?
No, I went through a great deal of we were here before.
Yes, sir.
As far as the security and the locations. There's not much more that you can add to that.
Right.
Unless you're going to give us $100,000 on the front.
I like that.
Ashley?
I don't have anything. He answered it all last time and then put more in the slides. So.
Okay. Caesar, can you go to full screen on the Zoom? And go to the participants. Is there anyone that has any questions? I can't see if there's any hands up or not.
I don't see.
No, I don't see any.
Okay. Is there anyone on Zoom that has any questions?
You should tell them to use the feature.
You should use the raise hand feature if you have any questions.
Pretty thorough presentation. So.
All right, I don't see any questions.
Then we got the regular audience here.
Does anybody from the audience have any questions?
I see suspicious as you look around.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you for.
Appreciate it. So just next steps in your process?
Well, the changes that went back and forth were very minor between yourselves and our council, and both sides have already agreed. I'll provide the updated draft HCA to you. I'll put it on the agenda for the 9th unless the board tells me otherwise.
Okay. I know that there was one item that we wanted to discuss.
Sure.
With being community impact fee would be funding. What do you call it? What's at the school?
A DARE officer.
A
for the
DARE
elementary.
officer. Mm-hmm. So working with, everyone that's got an approved HCA, and when they're up and running, trying to have a program at the elementary school, and possibly finding funding for a proportionality for the middle school and high school to have a DARE program running there as well.
I mean, my visceral reaction to that is that seems like a great use of the impact fees. So, we'd be happy to work with the town and find, education's great. We didn't really get into it a lot tonight, but we do a lot on consumer education. We provide educational materials in the store. One of the things that we talk about a lot is edibles. Typically, when adults try cannabis for the first time, it's an edible because they don't necessarily smoke, and it's an easy way to do that. And what they don't realize is you have to digest it before you feel the effects of it. And so maybe they have 2 cookies when they needed half a cookie, or whatever the case may be. So, or gummy maybe is a better example. So we do a lot of education around that, and we would definitely want to be part of the conversation as you move forward. If you do move forward with the DARE program, I think that's a great way, and we can make sure our materials and our resources are being shared, and we have very consistent messaging, kind of across the town. I think that'd be great.
Okay. The other issue would be possibly funding another police position where you'd be looking at administrative overhead for making sure everything's up and running, and having somebody go in and review what's going on in the school at the store. Somebody go in, check, see how the store is running. Not so much as security for the store, but just the
oversight.
Yeah, so we know, like, if there's traffic problems, like it's being noted that there's traffic problems, or issues with somebody else brought up litter with other stores.
Yeah.
So
What was it, litter?
litter was another issue that came up at other stores. I'm not sure it's so much for a marijuana store, because it shouldn't be consumed on.
Yeah. Well, can't be. Yeah, can't be.
Yeah. So I mean,
can't have loitering, can't have any of those kind of things.
So it'd be it's somebody going around making sure that those things are being in compliance, and whoever moves forward with just having an open idea that community impact, because we're aware that the HCA and the requirements are kind of up in the air with the state on whether or not those type of things are going to move forward. But I think for a long-term, agreement between the companies and the town that we're all in this together trying to move things forward. People that want to enjoy cannabis can do it responsibly, and the town's being backed up by making sure that those things are happening.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the other communities, and they maybe haven't thought of it as much as you guys have, which I think is great. But a lot of communities are using it for, a drug recognition officer, or, a DARE program certainly would fall in that realm. Or, maybe your drug recognition officer has an additional duty of going by and talking to our security folks. And, so other communities are doing that. We don't limit, and Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think in any way do we limit how the town can spend the money in the host community agreement. But those are certainly things that we would be supportive of. I mean, those are good programs. And
I think the applicants have taken that position because they're interested, obviously, in working with the town. The question long term is going to be the Cannabis Control Commission and state legislature putting further restrictions.
Right.
Documenting what expenditures are legitimate, which aren't. But right now, that's all still up in the air, and we only can work with the legislation, the regulations we have right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd be surprised, but you never know. I'd be surprised if the legislation did anything retroactively, and assuming this agreement was signed before that, it would just pull the rug out from so many towns, because they've started to use that money for things like you were talking about. But who knows? I mean, to Charlie's point, who knows? We don't know, and certainly board. But I would be surprised if it was retroactively. So I assume this agreement would uphold. And I think Charlie would tell you, we didn't have a lot of comments on it. It was very straightforward agreement. We thought, and I personally represent a lot of companies who've been in a lot of towns, and it's a year-long battle to get to something that we think is kind of compliant. And we thought this was a great agreement right out of the gate. So there was not a lot of notes back and forth between the attorneys. So we were appreciative of that. Okay. So hopefully those stand the test of time, and but certainly we would like to be part of that as it moves forward. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
Thank you.
So we'll recess until 7:30.
Recess, 7:30. All right. We'll move to recess at 7:30.
We roll with it. Yeah, they all showed up for the meeting, but not for this part.
Well, until it directly impacts most people, in most cases, and for us, although I was surprised, to be honest, no one came to ask questions about the traffic in that location. That's a busy corner. I mean, we'll watch Dunkin' Donuts and the issues we've had there, to the point they got people outside directing traffic. And it was the same thing as the medical we discussed a while back, going into, which is one of the reasons I've spent 18 months putting this together, trying to get it out of the middle of town for a lot of those reasons. So, hopefully. But we've been hung up for 7 months now. But I do have answers for your questions you had about the land, so we'll get into that tonight a little bit too.
Yeah, we got a couple of emails about that, so
Yeah, it's, I
I'm
would
sure, I'm sure it will be asked.
What was it about?
Oh, the land in, National, what's going on and all that, we've been hung up for 6-8 months now, longer than expected. It's the right place to go.
So, last week, your meeting was canceled.
Yes,
We were supposed to come and see you for conservation.
right.
So,
Oh, we had you on the schedule this week too, at 6 o'clock.
did anybody send a notice out to us for that?
I'm not sure, we can ask Charlie, he had it in the notes.
Okay, because I called Kathy and asked her if she had heard anything from anybody, and she said no. And then, so I called Jerry, since he had so much experience like Kathy did on board,
Yeah.
in case you asked any questions that I couldn't answer. So I asked Jerry to come up, but Kathy said she did not get anything, and I didn't either.
Huh.
The note said that we expected Kathy Evans to attend tonight's meeting. Did you talk to Kathy?
I thought you sent her a note. Yeah.
Okay. So there must have been miscommunication there, but Charlie had reached out to be here at 6.
As in Cool Hand Luke, what we have here is a failure to communicate.
Yes. So,
Cool hand, Luke?
if you'd like, we have a meeting next Tuesday too, the 9th. Do you want to put you?
Yeah, because we're meeting Pine Street,
Okay.
so I would imagine somewhere around 7:30.
So do you want us to put you before that?
Yeah.
We'll put like 6:30?
No, put us after,
After
Yeah.
the 7:30?
8 o'clock?
8 o'clock.
I suppose, yeah.
I don't know, it's past my bedtime, so
I was like, hopefully our
That's mine
meeting-
too, 'cause
hopefully our meetings aren't gonna go that
I
late.
get up at 5 and work in Boston, so
just working in Boston is good.
I never know when I'm gonna get
Well,
home.
our meeting's at 6:30. We could put you in at 7 and you guys could shoot over there at 7:30 so that you're not.
I don't know what time she scheduled Pine Street for.
Okay, well, Charlie, will you reach out to
Yes.
Kathy? See what time they
Yep.
schedule Pine Street, put them on the agenda for the 9th.
Okay.
And we'll figure out a time for that.
Okay.
Sorry.
So we'll do it next week?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
All right, sorry for the inconvenience.
We'll get to see you next week now too.
Okay.
So it's Caesar's already, whenever we're ready.
Caesar's already set up?
Yeah, that's the presentation there. And he can hear us, so whenever you say next slide, he'll go to the next slide.
Caesar, you can hear us? The door closed?
Man in the closet.
Why don't you want to open the door and listen to us? He's over us.
He likes being in the dark.
He likes being in the closet.
All right, then, we'll get started. All right, thank you so much for having us. Again, I know folks have already seen these, but we brought additional pictures and images. My name is Leslie Delaney Hawkins. I'm an attorney with Prince Louis Bell. With me is Phil Tringali, who is the proposed owner and operator. And then we have John Bunzel, who is Phil's son, as well as one of the co-owners and operators. And then Donnie Kine, who is our proposed head of security. So as my colleague Pete D'Agostino mentioned, you've already heard this presentation before. This is the statutorily required presentation to, should we be granted a host community agreement, move forward with filing an application with the CCC. So again, bear with us as we go through some of the details that you've heard, you understand. So the applicant is Cannabis Co. We are proposing a retail recreational marijuana establishment at the parcel on lot 10 on MEC 95, Monpont Street. And again, we have some images. I think folks here are familiar where that is. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to just go over some high points. Cannabis will be locally owned and operated. That's something that we're really proud of, and not just in the ownership, that we would also, when we're partnering with contractors or other service providers, we want an emphasis on hiring locally. And I'm going to ask Phil very briefly to kind of give an overview of himself and as a longtime Halifax resident.
Okay, I guess I can do that. I've lived in Halifax since 1984, although a lot of my time has been spent on the road with my businesses. I've owned my own companies since 1988. My first company was SEE Incorporated. It became actually a corporation. We were one of the leading providers of forensic microscopes in the crime labs to the states. ATF, FBI, I spoke in Quantico in the past. We have tools in China, systems at the crime labs, Beijing. I've been all over the world, Australia with that business. I also presently been the president, owner of PT Technology, and I sell semiconductor processing equipment. I guess everyone's probably heard about the chip business these days. And I sell the equipment they use in fabricating that. I cover New England and Eastern Canada with that business. In addition, I am the president of Cannabis Company.
And I think what this goes to demonstrate is that Phil has a long-time track record of owning and operating successful businesses, and he can bring those skills into this industry. Phil is a Vietnam-era veteran. He is a senior citizen. I will say that, but with only fondness. I think he looks
He's
very young. But again, that is something that is very important to Phil about this community and this proposed location, is that he wanted to find a location in Halifax. And we'll talk a little bit more about the location in a minute. Next slide, please.
Caesar.
So thank you, Caesar. So just some kind of high-level overview of figures and facts about cannabis in Massachusetts. As you know, and I'm sure folks at home know, you have to be 21 or over to get into one of these establishments. And one of the things that we'll talk about how highly regulated these are, it's not similar to a 19-year-old using a fake ID to get into a package store where you come before the board and you might get your liquor license suspended for a day. You lose your license, right? You were shut down by both the municipality and the Commonwealth and the CCC. So we know how seriously this is regulated and how seriously ensuring that youth does not have access and that there's no diversion. And we'll get into that a little more. The largest growing customer demographic with recreational cannabis is actually people over the age of 55, which is an interesting statistic. The average transaction is $100 or more. As we discussed, as was discussed in the prior presentation, you cannot consume on premise. So these establishments have to ensure not only is there no consumption inside, but there's no loitering or consumption in the area around the establishment. All retailers must utilize the sale-to-seat tracking system, which is highly regulated by the CCC. So if there was an incident of diversion or of theft, you can actually track down exactly, especially in the case of diversion, who the employee was who sold it, when it was sold, and who they actually sold it to. And that can be traced back to ensure that appropriate action is taken. Again, all of the signage is very, very strictly regulated. You can't have anything that could possibly be attractive to an individual under the age of 21. No cartoons, no silly lettering, no silly names. There's also a significant amount of regulation on what you can call the actual establishment. You can never have a marijuana leaf on any of your marketing or on your sign. You can't use slang for cannabis on your marketing or your slang. So again, all of that, in addition to the regulations that any municipality has, the CCC then even goes above and beyond in what can and can't be done. Next slide, please. All right, so moving towards the proposed location, and we have an aerial view here to kind of demonstrate where we're looking to site. So Cannabis has entered into a letter of intent for 7.5 acres within a 400-acre land lot. This proposed location is compliant with all of the applicable zoning. It's in an industrial zone, which would allow for a marijuana establishment with a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are no buffer zone issues, meaning it's not located within 500 feet of not just a public or private K-12 school, but also of any of the specific establishments that the bylaws here in Halifax prevent it from being located near, including a childcare facility, public park, public playground, or any facility where minors commonly congregate, as well as a establishment with a Section 12 pouring license. The proposed location is actually on the outskirts of Halifax, which is what really appealed to Phil, that this is an ideal location with both ample space for parking, but also ample space to construct the establishment. Because in this instance, and it's not something that you see very often, we're not looking to repurpose an existing building. We're actually looking to build something from the ground up that is a state-of-the-art establishment built specifically for this, including the queuing of lines, security, vault, access points. And we think that that's a really great opportunity to not just have to reconfigure an existing establishment, but to be able to address any and all operational and security concerns that folks have, ranging from the CCC regulations, but also to your municipal departments, from fire to inspectional services to police, which will allow us to respond to any specific concerns and kind of adapt the plans as we move along should we be granted a host community agreement. I will let Phil, do you want to speak a little bit to the site control? Obviously that was something that was raised at the last meeting.
As far as
the ground lease.
Yeah, we, right now, I know in the last meeting we had, you were concerned about the purchase going through. We've had the agreement in place to purchase. The funding is in the account waiting to go since March of this year. We've been in contact with the owners, which have agreed to provide a ground lease at this point in time for an extended period of time as prior to the purchase of the property. The latest update I have right now is a release from National Heritage by the end of the year, but I can only give you what I have as the latest. We all know how things go with planning and everything else. So we are in the process, and we'll have a ground lease to provide as part of our HCA request, and we will complete the purchase of the property as soon as it's released.
And the ground lease, obviously, which will be submitted to town council and to the board, would actually allow us, should we be granted an HCA, to move forward with the process with the CCC and with all the other applicable permitting here in the town. But we know that, some of the concerns when municipalities are granting an HCA is you don't want someone sitting on it, right? You don't want someone sitting and not moving forward with their application, and if they are approved with their build-up. So we absolutely understand that concern and are working hard to address it before we continue with the HCA conversations. Next slide, please.
One question.
Of course.
The owner of the property, do you know what his intentions are doing with the rest of the property, building homes or putting any other private?
I can't speak for the owner. You certainly can.
understand.
My understanding, as much as I know, and again, National Heritage, what they do. From what I've heard, they are going to probably retain 3/4 of the land for National Heritage, somewhere in that neighborhood, Troy. As far as the other parcel, until it's completed, there may be someone that's looking at the rest of it for conservation area. Other than that, that's as much as I know, and that's the owner's decision when they get it released. But that's my understanding right now. So there is an anticipation of building homes that I know of. I know part of that, there is an industrial lot that I think the entrance is there right now before the end of the property. And that was supposed to be potentially an industrial park. But I don't know of any residential that I'm aware of, and which was one of the reasons, I started looking almost 2 years ago in our town, where's the best spot to put a retail store? And there were only potentially 2 locations that I could see. One was on the other end of town where there is an HCA now. The problem there was a beauty salon and there were homes within 300 feet. The only location that was available other than that I could see in my analysis was over towards Plimpton, which is where I have the agreement to purchase the land. That meets everyone's requirements. It's a good place in town to keep it away from kids, keep traffic away from the center of town. And I think with our proposal, we've extended an outstanding proposal. And I'm ready to talk about some real numbers in the business because I don't think anyone's really gotten to that and what you're looking at for revenue for this town. You're not just looking at the...
I think you might have had a question.
So that lot, because Troy brought up what else was going to happen over there, which I understand you can't speak on that because you're not the owner.
Right.
But if you are to look at the assessor's record, the land that you're talking about is listed as non-developable.
On the land behind, on the major part of the lot, yeah. The lot on ours, there is wetlands, if you look at the breakdown of it, there is wetlands, but there's 3.5 acres of uplands on the front of that lot on the road, which is where we're looking at to put the store.
So, but right now it's just one lot, correct? They have
On
to-
lot. Yep.
Okay.
And if we can provide more information, happy to follow up.
I have, right now, site engineering is on the lot, breaking it down. We can't do the final plans for the building until we have the site and the breakdown of the property, as you know. So as soon as that is done, we'll have a ground lease put together prior to the purchase. I'm hoping to complete the purchase. The capital's in place by the end of the year, and we're going to hopefully get off a running start, get the approvals in place, and get the store built.
And again, we will obviously provide some additional supplemental information.
Well, there'll be a lot more coming for the town.
In terms of our proposed operations, it would be from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Because of the obviously varying potential layouts of the store, we're looking at a maximum capacity of about plus or minus 20 patrons. That gives us ample space for social distancing, to manage queuing, and obviously because of the size of the lot, there's no threat of people kind of queuing, going out onto the sidewalk because we are set back. We'll be looking at between 6 and 8 employees per shift, the total of about 25 employees, a mixture of full-time and part-time. We're going to have a local hiring preference, but we're also going to look to veterans, women, and BIPOC individuals to ensure diversity throughout all aspects of the business. As I mentioned before, we think that it's important to ensure diversity not just in your employees, but in your management and who you're contracting with, and just in terms of every kind of aspect of the business. We're looking at a retail area, but depending on which plan should we move forward, that the town would find amenable, of between 1,900 and 2,400 square feet in the retail area. Again, because of the size of the lot, we can provide ample parking, 50 spaces, if not more, for a combination of our patrons as well as our employees to ensure that there's not a negative impact on traffic and parking. Next slide, please. Right now, we're also looking at establishing a covered outdoor space that would be dedicated to any additional queuing by patrons. So because of the size of the establishment, we don't think there are going to be lines, but this gives us covered area outside. So let's say we have patrons who for some reason were at capacity and there's a thunderstorm. They're not just all going to try and run inside because we are providing this outdoor covered area. Again, as I mentioned, because this will be new construction, it can be state-of-the-art and built to this specific purpose, which is unique and something that we haven't seen in a lot of different municipalities across the state. We do think that the anticipated traffic impact will be negligible based on this location, but we're also going to engage with traffic engineers so we actually have more information on that point. But again, that was one of the appealing parts to this location, was that we didn't think that it would have the negative impact on quality of life, such as traffic that other potential locations that Phil had looked at may have. Next slide, please. Again, these are the exterior renderings. I know that we showed these before. They're online. These are obviously things that would be working with the town on should we move forward with a host community agreement. One of the things you'll see is that we're thinking long-term with this site. So when you see things such as a potential drive-through, that's not something that with the state's regulations exists right now. It's something that we think someday may, so it wouldn't be part of anything we're filing at this juncture, and obviously we'd come back to the town to have that conversation if that becomes legal at some point with the state. But it's just an example of how Phil's really committed to kind of the long term and these changing regulations and what that could look like.
How would you control security age-wise if the person is driving through and you have no way of...
It would still be, instead of the curbside pickup where they come out to your car, which is what's allowed now, it would actually be a window. So they would still go through the same age verification, just like curbside pickup now. We're just thinking about it in kind of a different structure to move through. But again, it would still be the double identification process, the visual process, and there would actually be a person. Again, it's not something we're proposing at this juncture, but again, as these regulations change, curbside pickup wasn't permitted until COVID, right, under the state's regulations, and we've actually seen in Boston and other municipalities, we loved it because it really reduced people could make their orders online. It encouraged online ordering because they weren't parking getting out of the store, walking in, spending time in the actual establishment, going through the transaction. And that's actually something that the CCC has extended past the state of emergency, and we believe is incorporating into their regulations moving forward because it has been so successful.
There's 2 points, I think, to answer your question, Troy. As you first come in, IDs are checked coming into the perimeter of the establishment. You also have a second check when you do a pickup. So if you drive up to the car pickup window, whatever you want to call it, if that is established, you basically identify yourself there on the second occasion before you pick up your product from that. Same thing as you come in, you're identified coming in, and if you went to a will call or a curbside pickup window, same type of situation would be right there. Now, both of those in the design don't have to be in place. We've designed a building to meet 18 states' requirements. So I'm trying to look long-term because it changes. The CCC just drafted all new regulations. They now have 3 transport licenses that came out in June of this year. The same thing as we've done in town with the bylaw changes, 300 feet from residential lots, plus the state regulations. So for me to do long-term planning the last year and a half, it's been horrendous, to be honest. Because when I get to a point ready to go, something changes a little bit. Or in this case, quite frankly, the land situation with National Heritage didn't expect this long a delay. Quite frankly, we were hoping to be a lot closer with things today than we are. But here nor there, this is to benefit not just local business people, local residents, but the base in this town. The numbers are very large, and if you'd like to discuss that, I'd be happy to get into that.
We're going to get there. So we can just move through. I know we've already seen some of these renderings, so we can move through to, I believe, slide 14. And again, these are all available on the town's website, and all of these specific details would be worked out should we be granted an HCA as we go through the permitting process. And I apologize if we can go back to slide 13, please. Oh no, I'm sorry. You were correct. I was wrong. There we go. So Donald Kine, who is here with us today, will serve as our head security consultant. Donald can speak for himself, but do you want to give a really brief introduction as opposed to me reading off when you're sitting right behind me?
So I was a corporal in the Marine Corps, and I'm actually in the Army National Guard right now. I have over 20 years experience in security. I've done everything from security officer to desk to high threat, high risk, close protection for generals overseas in Iraq. I've been a private investigator. So pretty much everything in security I know. And the plan for this is a layered plan. So Phil talked about when you drive in, you're checked, your ID's checked. The whole property, if you think of a bullseye, you have the dot in the middle. Then we have all these different facets and layers of security around, and I think there's some of the stuff on the slide there.
Yeah, so obviously the CCC has very strict requirements, but what we want to do is not just meet those, we want to exceed those, and that's where this idea of the kind of layered approach with securing the actual property with fencing, lights, there'll be security cameras inside and outside, the multiple points of inspecting identification. Again, no one under the age of 21 years of age would be allowed in. We would utilize scanners to ensure that these IDs are actually valid, which is something that I think is really important, at least that we've seen in Boston, is that the places that are the most successful actually utilize scanners in addition to actually just the visible inspection. Next slide, please. Again, there'll be extensive security camera coverage. That's all dictated by the CCC, but the local police, we would always, of course, retain those and make that footage available to the local police. All employees would have to go through a significant process of background checks, and that's regularly reviewed by the state. Each employee has to have a state ID card from the CCC, and we would be enforcing that. Again, ID confirmation at entry and point of sale. Next slide, please. And again, this is just kind of, I won't read it off the page to you, but this is what we've just detailed about having the goal of building a facility from the ground up that not just meets the CCC regulations, but actually exceeds it. And this will give us the opportunity to work with fire, police, and other key departments here in town to help really integrate their requests and their suggestions as we move forward with any sort of preparation of site plans and build out. Next slide, please. Diversion prevention, obviously this is something that's incredibly important, not just to the state, but to us as well. Phil's grandchildren grew up here, he lives here, he understands how important this piece of it is. In the last presentation, there was the conversation about the DARE program, and if that is something that can be incorporated into host community agreements. As you probably know, there's all of this back and forth about what can and can't be in a host community agreement, and municipalities are really struggling with it, and they're really struggling with how they can spend that money. And I can tell you that because all of my budget team in Boston was just trying to wrap their mind around what can we do. We have all of this money, and the law says it has to go to impacts reasonably related to the operation of that establishment, not cannabis, not the failed war on drugs. And that's something that we're working with the CCC on their revised municipal guidance, so that if they were to come out and say, a DARE program isn't something that we would want in an HCA, we would be more than willing to partner with you for a separate agreement if they said that's not where we think that belongs, or legislation passes where they say that's not where we think that belongs. But so we understand that challenge, and we're more than happy to work with you and to kind of draft agreements accordingly. Next slide, please. Nuisance abatement, obviously this is a huge issue. You are the citing authority determining the time, manner, and place that this does not negatively impact your community. Again, that's why Phil wanted to bring an establishment to his community, right? Because he really cares about Halifax. So we are committed to working closely, one more. Thank you. To working closely with the town, with the residents, with the business community, in providing phone numbers that you could be reached at all times if there are any concerns, about having twice-a-year meetings with key stakeholders to discuss any concerns, or more if necessary. Right, this is going to be locally owned and locally managed, so there'll always be someone on the ground that neighbors, residents, business owners, city officials can reach out to in real time if there are any concerns. And again, this is also highly regulated by the reporting requirements of the CCC. And what we would commit to is not just reporting to the CCC, but also self-reporting to the town as well, so that that information is not just going to the state, but goes to the town, and we can have those conversations with town officials as well. Next slide, please. One back. Thank you. It's a thankless job. So plan for positive community impact, again, approximately 25 jobs with a preference on local hiring, increased security and lighting both inside and outside of the facility. In the host community agreement, we're obviously agreeing to the 3% community impact fee. There's also the 3% local option tax. 5% of the profits, once opened, would go to a nonprofit to be established, and we would work with the town to appoint individuals to that nonprofit's board for the People of Halifax Fund to go back to other causes in the community. Phil, I know you've been wanting to get to your projections on numbers and the research you've done, so I will let you speak to that.
Well, I guess I can. The other basis for the community fund, or the town fund, was to give something back that you could work with. For example, you want to put a DARE officer on staff for the town, that may be an issue that can be taken up with that. We've talked about a new fire station in town. There's no reason that capital can't be used for that. Well, what I'd like to do is establish a fund that's handled by the town, people of the town that come in and determine what's the best course of action. Not just us as business owners, as selectmen, but what do the people want in town? What's going to benefit the people the most? So we're willing to commit, which we quite frankly don't have to, 5% of profits of the store back to the town in a town fund. Now, I don't know anyone who's done this. I know there's been discussions in the earlier presentation, but I feel that's very important as part of our contribution back to the town. I intend to work with the town. Quite frankly, Leslie's going to hit me. If the town doesn't want us in the town, tell us, because I'm doing this for the town. There's many locations we could take this, quite frankly. It's a huge investment on my part, my associate's part, and we want to do it in our town. Now, I've listened to all sorts of numbers, so I'd like to talk about those, if I may, a little bit, because I've been putting together business plans for a year and a half. I've gone through the marijuana business, the retail store, with a fine-tooth comb. I've been to most of the retail operations in Massachusetts. I've talked with visited a number out of state, in states that have had it longer than Mass. I was just in Nevada at the MJ convention. I was able to go to some incredible dispensaries out there, but they've had it for, 4, 5, 6 years. And it's important we do it right. What's happening in Massachusetts, like the Wild West, everyone's jumping in, find a location, stick it in. Oh, they're giving special permits. Well, let's go over and stick something in there. I don't want that. I raised my kids here. My grandkids are being raised here, and I want something out of the way that generates money to the town. We talked earlier, taxes. We just got hit with new taxes. We need some business tax base in town. Now, projections. Right now, today, we talked about some numbers. The real numbers are, and I put those out earlier, roughly 300 tickets a day, $120 a ticket is the average retail store in the state as of April-May timeframe. Business projections I put together, realistically, in the second full year of operation of this store, we'll be doing $22 to $26 million in revenue. Now, if you do the calculations based on that, between property taxes, real estate taxes, I should be able to contribute with our business anywhere from $1.5 to $2 million a year within 2 to 3 years of operation. And that's what I want to bring to this town. There's many other towns out there that would like that type of base and infrastructure, especially from someone in the town who cares about the town. I don't live over in Kingston. I don't live in another state. I'm not an MSO out there trying to come in because of the new laws and just throwing things out. I want a good business in town that generates property taxes, real estate taxes, and of course the taxes from marijuana. And the numbers I see out there should be a great contribution. We know that should contribute a huge portion to the school tax bill we pay at Silver Lake right now. So when I see some of the numbers, now I go through dispensaries, Northeast Alternatives and Fall River was doing 2,700 tickets a day when they opened, until 2 other stores opened up in the last 3 months. So there are huge numbers. But I'm trying to give you the real numbers from projections from the business the way I see it. And this is a huge investment. This is I've spent hundreds of thousands. This is a multi-million-dollar investment going into our town that I want to do here.
You think you can do those numbers even with other facilities in the town?
Yes, I do.
Because we're looking at, 3 other HCA's?
If you look at 10 facilities, this business will be unique. We're not going to be the local type, throw a store in. Cannabis and Rockland. The numbers, they took a split entry branch, threw a section on it, and if you look at the numbers out of them, what they're churning, it's huge to the town. Those numbers are real, I'm giving you. And I think I'll do it with any competition. There's always going to be competition. Now, one of the things you've already discussed in the town is limitations. As a resident, I agree with that to a point, and I think that's going to come to the state. You can't saturate it, just like liquor stores. We've determined there's a regulation, there's so many that can do it, and I'm here to help the town. I'm going to put this store someplace. I'll tell you right now. I want to put it in Halifax with your blessing.
So obviously, the next step for us is to get you more information on site control, because we understand that's a concern, and we would like to, submitted a draft to a community agreement. We would like to continue that conversation, and obviously look to Charlie and to the board once we provide that site control information to hopefully move forward with that conversation with us.
Caesar, do you want to see if anybody in the audience in the Zoom meeting have any hands up? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have names.
Sure.
So John, I haven't spoke yet, Phil's son. So a little bit on the land control. we've negotiated a deal with the landowners for what we're trying to do, and they know the bylaws we're trying to meet. So therefore, if we get approved for an HCA and we get to build this out, they're not gonna go ahead and sell a lot with a house next to us, because they know that's a conflict, if that makes sense. I'm not sure, we can't speak on their behalf, but they know what we're trying to do, and I don't think that they would make plans that would, impact that down the road.
Well, things change, ownership changes.
That's true.
Somebody dies in the family, somebody inherited, they don't know what to do.
Well,
I agree.
No argument there, Troy, but what we're saying is the location is the location today, the location it is.
Well, that's my only concern.
And that's how we have to base that. Same thing as when I went out and I looked around town for a location, and I spent a lot of time doing that. This is 3.5 acres, which gives us a good enough site to build, quite frankly, almost any size operation. We don't want to do that. We want to put together a design that is going to be pleasant to the community, a design that's going to be energy efficient, which is what we're looking at. And we will present all of the plans and everything to the town each step of the way. The biggest thing is getting the site done, getting the land purchased. Now, we will have a contract for the land until the purchase is completed. The estimated time, and again, I can't speak for National Heritage, I wish I could. The last update, when I talked to you, was November. The last update, they'd have it concluded by the end of this year. Quite frankly, that could change. We can't wait any longer. I will have the land lease to put in front of you. That will be in place for an extended period of time, up until the time we can complete the purchase of the property. So at this point, my hands are tied. I was hoping to have everything completed in March, April. I mean, we notified the town in March that what we were trying to do, and I've been working profusely with my team to get to that point. So we will meet your requirements, though, before we ask for a completed HCA.
Thank you.
Caesar.
Just one last question. When did you serve? When
did I serve? I got out in 72.
Oh, you're young blood.
Yeah, I told you, you got 10 years on me, buddy.
I got out in
Catching up to you.
I got out in 66, went in 63.
I leave it for the young ones today.
I had 4 brothers in the Navy, 1 in the Marines, and I was in the Army.
Oh, your parents must have been stressed.
There was 11 of us, so they could spare us.
Yeah, a couple extras here and there.
So we have no questions on Zoom, Caesar said.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what you want the board to do is wait for you to provide further documentation of land control before they come back to discuss whether to approve the HCA or not.
I can put together a land lease.
The land lease has already been drawn. We're going to be signing it probably by the end of the week.
Okay. Well, I can put it on the agenda for Tuesday, and if everything's ready, then everything's ready. If it's not, it's not. The board can continue it to the 23rd.
We'll have it by Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll have it by Tuesday.
Okay, and I'll coordinate with you tomorrow, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time.